It was.
Good evening, everybody. This is Mike Shower again, back in Juneau. Wait a minute, I never left. Still here. All right, so what are we going to talk about tonight? We'll be doing this a lot with these little these debriefs by Dozer, talking about what's going on in Juneau, what's happening. So the reason that we did two, I said we try to do one. Every once in a while, things are going to progress and go fast, and I talk fast. I'm going to do my best to slow down. I know I talk really, really fast. I get in trouble all the time, and it's hard for people to follow sometimes. So I will do my best to slow my brain down so that I can speak at a pace that you can hear me without me muddling things together. So I will try. But, so today, I have been talking for some time about the Binding Caucus and how that affects Alaska. So people have been asking what I'm going to do. Am I going to stay in the caucus? Am I in the caucus? All these questions. I said just be patient because we're working on things. And one of the things we're working on, even with the lack of staff and where we are with the committee changes, reorganization, all that stuff, we are incredibly busy, right? Still working with other people in the building. This isn't really about necessarily people in the building. This is about a system, a structure that is allowing things to happen that I believe is kind of un-American, anti-American. I think people use those terms, but not freedom. This is ultimately about freedom. So, tonight briefly, because I launched two measures today, one a statutory bill, Senate Bill 187, and a Senate Joint Resolution number 17. And those are to hopefully be able to get the Binding Caucus eliminated as something that can be used in politics in Alaska via the legislature. So, there are some folks in the House that have expressed interest, so my hope is to have it going concurrently through the House and the Senate, to have hearings, to get this out into the public debate. I've had some folks in the legislature upset that I'm talking on the radio and social media about it, and I said, you know what, that's fine. I'm still going to talk about it because I am vocal in things I am passionate about. However, what I want to do is bring it into the public debate. So if that's what we're going to do, let's do it. Let's get it out on the table in committees. Let's debate it. Let's have both sides of the argument. Let's talk about the pros and the cons. Have it recorded and see where we go. Fair enough. That's the way the process was designed to work, right? So that's what we're going to do. I hope I get a chance to have these in some committees and talk about them. We'll see where they go. But because I launched those two measures today, I thought it was important to have an extra Facebook Live this week. Just spend a few minutes talking about this to explain those bills. And if I do this in the future with other stuff, I'll probably have a short Facebook Live again, just so that we can talk about those specific items. You'll know what we're up to here and what we're attempting to accomplish. Just like I said, we're not sitting around doing nothing. We are really busy. I make jokes about it, but that's just because, no, let's show my hand. I like to joke about things. So, let's talk about a caucus. What is a caucus? Simple, easy, nothing to it. Happy to be part of a caucus. I've said it before. That's just a group of people with similar ideas and similar goals to do something. No big deal. A caucus can be virtually anything. There's like an aviation caucus and a farm caucus and all kinds of caucuses, right? No big deal. What is, however, a binding caucus? In Alaska, many states have made this illegal, by the way. Talked about this at the press conference earlier today. We posted that on Facebook. In the federal government, they don't use a binding caucus. Some people try to say that they do, but trust me, they don't. And some states have made it illegal. And what we modeled and kind of patterned our bills after was a state, or the state of Colorado had a give a legislator, what is it, gavel? I forget exactly what it was. Basically, every legislator gets a vote, right? And it was about the Binding Caucus and promising votes, and there was issues. It was taken to a court case, went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and it was confirmed that, in fact, that does violate the Constitution to promise votes and to bind people to votes. And so we modeled it after that, looking for somebody that had already gone through this, adjudicated through the court system. We wanted to not just be on our own and sit here and try to generate something new and reinvent the wheel. So you have this Binding Caucus, right? And what it is essentially your legislator. So let's use the Senate as the example, because that's where we are. 20 senators, 13 Republicans, 7 Democrats. When we organized in November of 18 and made an agreement to modify the Binding Caucus rule, because myself and one other senator refused to join the old method of the Binding Caucus, the one Democrat ended up coming across, so there's 14 of us in this Binding Caucus. And we modified the rules. The old rules said that basically, you had to vote for the capital and the operating budgets. That's one thing we're supposed to do as a legislature before we go away for the summer. And any procedural votes. Procedural votes are made up by the president. They really don't exist. It's been researched. They're just something we make up, like many of the things going to make up the rules and maybe follow them. Okay. And so whatever the president says on the floor is a procedural vote, you're supposed to vote for those things. If you did not, if you ever had to vote no for whatever reason, then the old binding caucus rules, you were gone. Kicked out, you're done. So that means you lose any chairmanships, any committees you're on, staff, pushed into the broom closet, that kind of stuff. That's what happened to the current governor. It's happened to several other senators throughout time and some House reps. I don't want to go into names on that one, but it's happened before, often enough. And when we made that change in November of 18, we negotiated to say, okay, you still have to vote for the operating capital budget and those procedural votes because we could not get enough Republicans to say no. Part of me didn't want to join it at all because I really still stand against this concept in general. But because we made it, they agreed to modify it that if you had to vote no on the capital budget, the operating budget, then the answer would be you would lose a chairmanship. That's it. Still keep your committees, your staff, all that kind of stuff. So you're still engaged, still able to be influential, execute the things that the people in your district want you to do, et cetera, et cetera. So we joined. And we went forward and said, not perfect. They didn't like it. We didn't really like it, but we're in the middle. We'll give it a shot. So how does that work? Well, we've gone over this before to talk and focus more on the binding caucus, just as the example. What happened, last summer we had some vote issues. Different votes were taken, and as I explained last week, without going into more detail, this is more probably about agenda stuff and removing senators, in this case, that supported certain things and putting senators in place that supported other things, right? So I think that's where a lot of the reorganization, the shuffle came from. But that binding caucus, that's what happened. Your legislators promise a vote, and then they have to give that vote, and if they don't give the vote, those things are taken away from them, okay? So that's kind of the binding caucus. That's what it is and kind of how it works as an explanation. So let's go into binding caucus pros, binding caucus cons. The pros and the cons, okay? The goods and the bads. Good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's talk about the binding caucus pros. One of the pros of it, and one of the arguments you will hear consistently down here in Juneau, is that we have to get something done, okay? True enough, we have to pass a budget. That is a constitutional responsibility we have. All right, so if you have a binding caucus and you've gotten X number of legislators to agree to the binding caucus, what can the Senate President, what can the Rules Chair, what can the Finance Co-Chairs rely on? Oh, we get to a certain point, we can make our members vote because they're going to have to vote for it. So whatever happens doesn't really matter because in the end we're going to be able to vote for it. They'll tell you, well, you get your input on the way, so it still works. You get some input in the budget. Here's where that falls apart. And I've been through the process enough to see it with my own eyes. You get some input to the budget. We have the first votes. It goes to the House. It comes back. It changes. You have a conference committee, and I'm talking fast again. You have this conference committee between them, and it all changes. Just like it changed last year. When it first went out, we had a full PFD. We're like, yay, we got a full PFD. We're following the statute. And we had those budget reductions that were gone via the vetoes that the governor did. So we're like, hey, we're pushing the budget down a little bit. Okay, we can see where we are. Well, when we went a little further into the process, the next thing you know, we have an appropriation bill that comes out that basically restores most of those vetoes. The budget grows again. The PFD is chopped in half and taken from the citizens once again, and we're forced to vote for that. So the reality is you don't have the influence that you think you do under a binding caucus. So while it is a method to get something done, it is what I would call political expediency. You're selling something to get that done. You're forcing legislators. You are coercing them and twisting their arm to make it happen. But some people would say that's a pro, so I put it up as a pro. I have heard that it saves us money. Okay? Here would be my response to that. The biggest budgets in Alaska's history have occurred under a binding caucus. So that doesn't fly. It doesn't work. Okay? The grabs on the PFD, taking the PFD and not following statute, occurred under a binding caucus. These big budgets occurred under a binding caucus. Draining the CBR in our savings account of $14 billion over the last 5-6 years occurred under a binding caucus. I'm a little bit confused on how we're saving money with the binding caucus. I don't see it, folks. The empirical data does not support that position. Okay? I talked a little bit about political expediency. Back to we have to get something done versus it might allow you to get something done. Okay? Here's my take on this one. You let the process play out. What do I mean? The Founding Fathers designed a system that you had tension between the House, the Senate, and the governor. These things move back and forth. We have a system that was designed to not move too fast in one direction. and allow a small group, a minority, to have authoritarian power where they could basically shove their agenda and will down people's throats, and they could do it quickly. Do you really want us to be able to move fast in a way that just a few people want to happen? Or do you want to have us forced to be able to negotiate back and forth between the House, the Senate, and the governor and go, that's good, we're going to have to negotiate on that. Nope, you're going to have to give a little bit over here. Nope, you're going to have to slow the process down. It's going to take time. Folks, I'll tell you right up front, it is worth it to me to follow the Constitution. It is worth it to me to let the system play itself out until 1 July, if that's what it takes. It can be democracy, right? This kind of thing might really represent a republic, but this democratic process versus democracy can be slow, it can be messy, it can be chaotic, it can be painful. That's okay. That's the way it was meant to work. If you go the opposite of that, you can go to an authoritarian regime or an oligarchy or even a monarchy. Well, things can happen really fast. But is that really what you want? Because now you're under the thumb of a few people ruling you. Do you want to be ruled or represented? Okay? I would rather let it be messy. And here's my contention for those that think that we should have political expediency of a binding caucus. Let it play out till 1 July. By 2 July, legislators are going to fold like a house of cards. Why? Because at that point, everybody, including me, most likely, do not want the checks to stop flowing from Alaska because we do not get to do continuing resolutions like the federal government where we keep kicking the can down the road. Okay? So no legislator is going to want the government to shut down on 2 July. We will find a resolution. We will find compromise. And I think even my very conservative district, by and large, would understand if I had to vote for a budget on 1 July that wasn't perfect because we don't want the state to shut down. Let the process play out. Don't shortcut the system. So that's a lot of stuff that I kind of even folded together with the cons, but let's talk about the cons. I just said shortcut the system. What do I mean? With that political expediency, instead of letting the system play out as it was designed, what is happening is we are instead going, we got to do something. So let's just shortcut the system and just make it happen by giving the power to just a few legislators out of the 60 and let them make all the decisions, and then because of this binding caucus, the rest of us have to do it. Yeah, I'm not real comfortable with that. We are, like I said, consolidating power. Instead of 60 legislators, you have 6 that go into the budget conference to really make the final decision, and what comes out of that, by and large, we're pretty much going to have to vote for it because we have to do something, right? So consolidating power in the hands of a few is always a dangerous place we have been at in history. Always. We have a representative republic, so we have many representatives, not just a few. Okay? So at least having a voice, correct? I mean, you're going to have a president and others, but you hope that everybody has an equal voice. The reality of this system, folks, is the voices are no longer equal. You have some legislators down here with very little voice, if any, and you have some up here that have a lot of power. Not really comfortable with the direction that this is moving us. Like I said, this is ripe for corruption. It is ripe for abuse. You have a system in place where if you have people that want to abuse their power, they have the authority to do so because we handed it to them with the binding caucus. They can punish legislators. I'm going to skip right down to punishment, right? They can do that. They can strip you of committees. They can strip you of chairmanships. They can kick you out the door. They can do all kinds of stuff to you. Go, oh my goodness, really? Why are we even having that discussion in the modern age? Okay, in a law and order republic. We shouldn't be discussing these things, but it is ripe for corruption if somebody chooses to abuse it. We've given them a structure. These bills, folks, what this is about to me is not about people and even what's happening now. It's about a structural change that makes sure that this type of thing can't happen in Alaska. That's what I'm trying to do, is look at a problem and solve it. That's what this is about. It really is. You have an ethical conundrum, right? Literally, your legislators, pardon the language, are damned if they do, damned if they don't, right? If your legislator decides to vote for the budget, even though it's a bad one, doesn't work for their district, they don't think it's right, it's too expensive, not enough money, whatever it is, they have to vote yes on it. Oh boy, they don't want to do that, but then they don't want to do the other thing. If they vote no, they lose the ability to effectively represent their district under a binding caucus. Why? Because now they lose those chairmanships and the committees and all the ability to influence things and help shape strategies, shape all kinds of things that need to happen. There's your influence. Woo, gone, right? So that's a conundrum. The quid pro quo. I put this up there because that's been in the country's lexicon for years with the current president and all the things that are happening with impeachment, et cetera, that were happening with it since it's kind of over. That quid pro quo, right? Your legislator to dive into a binding caucus is promising votes, not just months in advance, but over a year in advance. before your legislator has any idea what they're going to vote for and what it's going to be, whether it's a procedural vote or whether it's a budget, they promised it. And in return, they get something. They get chairmanship, staffs, blah, 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 right? Really? To me, that falls under AS, bribery. We've talked about this before. I brought it up today. AS 1156.100, bribery. A person commits the crime of bribery if the person confers, offers to confer, or agrees to confer a benefit upon a public servant with the intent to influence the public servant's vote, opinion, judgment, action, decision, or exercise of official discretion. It's actually a Class B felony. Now, what I'm not contending here is that legislators are out bribing straight up or using coercion. I'm saying that a structure is in place that can happen. The appearance of it happening is certainly there with people right now because legislators are being punished for doing what they think is right under a system that is ripe for corruption and abuse of power. Okay. Furthermore, when we get to, okay, so your legislator promises in a quid pro quo, I'm going to give you my votes. Ugh. And in return, I'm going to get some stuff. Now let's go to the second part of that. You have coercion. Why? Because your legislator says, oh my goodness, I have to vote for those things or else I'll be punished. AS 41.530, coercion. A person commits the crime of coercion if the person compels another to engage in conduct from which there is a legal right to abstain or abstain from conduct in which there is a legal right to engage, by means of instilling in the person who is compelled a fear that, if the demand is not complied with, the person who makes the demand or another may take or withhold action as a public servant or cause a public servant to take or withhold action. Folks, we're talking right down the alley of voting. Promising your vote, and then being coerced to give that vote or lose something. People may not be doing it, it may not be illegal, it may not necessarily be happening, but the appearance of it to us and the structure set up to allow these things to happen, I'm sorry folks, that needs to go away. That's why I'm doing this. This needs to be made illegal in Alaska. It should be in our Constitution that we cannot have this type of binding caucus. Legislators are free to always vote in a way they think best, based on the data they have available to them, what the people sent them to do. We should never be talking about punishment. Why? At the end of the day, this system, folks, does this right there. Your voice is silenced. If your legislator does not do what they promised well in advance to do, not only will they be punished, your voice is silenced. Why? Because your legislator gets marginalized and pushed to the side. They lose the ability to have that kind of a voice, right? So what I would tell you as we finish up here 16, 17 minutes into it, trying to keep these as short as possible, but it is hard because there's so much information I want to share with you. This one I'm really passionate about, as you can tell, because I think this is a structural change to make the state more ethical, more transparent, or legislature more ethical and transparent, forcing us to behave better so that if you do have bad people come in, they can't do these things if they would use it and abuse it. You don't want that to happen. And we've seen, I don't know a better way to say it than what happened to some of us recently, that this kind of thing seems to be what happened, right? Here's what I would ask you, because people are always going to ask, what can you do now that, hundreds of thousands of voices were silenced because there was at least, 5 or so senators and that were essentially punished, stripped of their voice. This should be a defining issue for you as Alaskans. This should be something you should be highly concerned about. This should be something you should be asking your legislators about in the future during elections, and candidates that come in, you should be asking them, do you support this type of governance structure, or do you stand against it? And if you have legislators that seem to be okay with this, because I think, honestly, I'll be real honest, real frank here with you folks, I think people are comfortably numb, as the Pink Floyd song went. They're comfortably numb with this system. They've been around so long, I almost can't really blame them. They've just kind of grown up in this system. They're numb to it. And I think it's time we stop it, which is why I'm trying to take a stand on this and go, enough, we need to change it. And I'm the new guy coming in. I think there's a few others going, you know what, I can see this crystal clear, and I'm asking for help. Alaska, make this a defining issue. Let's change this. Let's clean the state up. Let's make this ethical and transparent so you can see that and your voice is never silenced. You can go to akleg.gov and check out the 2 bills. I posted them on Facebook. We posted the press conference we had earlier today. You can share this. I ask that you would. Get people engaged, because this is all part of everything, like I said, being engaged in your government in so many ways, but this is a big one, folks. This is a big one. It really is. Once again, I appreciate your time. I hope I didn't take too long. I hope I talked a little slower tonight so it wasn't so fast. Like I said, sometimes I just, whew, off you go. And I appreciate, again, you spending 2 nights with us this week. We will see you next week. We'll be doing more as usual. Every week we're going to do at least one. So we'll talk to you then. Until then, stay warm, and we will see you in about a week. Take care. Good night.